Karen belittled a single black mom. GoFundMe raised $40,000 in her honor. The fluorescent lights of the grocery store hummed, casting a sterile glow on the colorful displays of produce and packaged goods. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the aisles were filled with the usual assortment of shoppers, frazzled parents, hurried office workers, and the occasional retiree. Among them was Karen, a woman whose perfectly coiffed hair and designer handbags seemed slightly out of place amidst the everyday hustle and bustle. Karen was a study in contrast. To the outside world, she presented an image of polished perfection. She was a prominent member of her suburban community, a regular at charity events, and the owner of a successful boutique. Her life, as showcased on her meticulously curated social media accounts, was a seamless blend of luxury and leisure. But beneath the surface, Karen harbored a less flattering set of beliefs. She held a series of tightly wound assumptions about the world, particularly about people who were different from her. And those assumptions often manifested in subtle and not so subtle ways. She was in the express lane, her cart filled with a carefully selected assortment of organic produce, gourmet cheeses, and imported wines. She prided herself on her refined palate and her commitment to a healthy lifestyle, a lifestyle that, in her mind, set her apart from, well, from others. Ahead of her in line was a young woman with a little girl in tow. The woman looked tired, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes practical and worn. She was black, and she was paying for her groceries with food stamps. Karen watched the scene unfold with a mixture of impatience and disdain. She tapped her foot, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the polished floor. She glanced at her watch, a Rolex naturally, and sighed dramatically. The little girl, no more than 4 or 5, was clutching a small, brightly colored toy. She chattered excitedly to her mother, her voice filled with the innocent joy of a child. The mother smiled, her eyes filled with a weary but profound love. Karen rolled her eyes. The woman's voice, the child's babble, the whole scene, it was all so common, so unrefined. Finally, it was the woman's turn to pay. She carefully counted out her food stamps, her brow furrowed in concentration. The cashier, a young man with a friendly smile, patiently waited. Karen shifted her weight impatiently. "Could you please hurry up?" she said, her voice laced with thinly veiled irritation. "Some of us have places to be." The young mother glanced back, her eyes widening slightly. A flush of embarrassment crept up her cheeks. She fumbled with the food stamps, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible. It's been a long day." Karen scoffed. "I can only imagine," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. She glanced pointedly at the little girl, then back at the mother. "It must be so difficult." The young mother's eyes flashed with hurt. She straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening slightly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice low but firm. "What's that supposed to mean?" Karen smirked. "Oh, come on," she said. "We all know the challenges you people face. Single motherhood, food stamps. It's a real struggle. I don't know how you do it." She said, "you people," as casually as if she was talking about the weather. The young mother's face contorted in a mixture of anger and disbelief. Her daughter, sensing the tension, began to whimper, clutching her mother's leg tightly. "How dare you?" the mother hissed, her voice trembling. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know my story. You have no right to judge me." Karen raised an eyebrow, her expression one of bored superiority. "Oh, please," she said. "Spare me the sob story. We all know how it goes." The young mother's eyes burned with fury. "You think you're so much better than me?" she said, her voice shaking. "Because you shop at fancy stores and drive a fancy car? You have no idea what real struggle is. You live in a bubble." Karen laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "And you live on handouts," she retorted. "Don't pretend you're some kind of saint." The cashier, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to stop. You're harassing this customer." Karen glared at him, her face flushed with indignation. "I'm not harassing anyone," she snapped. "I'm simply stating a fact." "It's not a fact," the young mother said, her voice rising. "It's a stereotype, and it's offensive." "Oh, please," Karen sneered. Get over yourself." At that moment, another customer, an older woman with a kind face, she stepped forward. "I heard what you said," she said to Karen, her voice quiet but firm, "and I'm appalled. This young woman is working hard to provide for her daughter. She deserves our respect, not your judgment." Several other customers began to nod in agreement. Karen, for the first time, seemed to realize that she was not the center of the universe. "Mind your own business," she muttered, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. The young mother, her face still flushed, turned to the cashier. "Please," she said, her voice trembling slightly, Just, just finish the transaction. I want to go home." The cashier nodded, his expression sympathetic. He quickly finished ringing up her groceries, handing her the bag with a warm smile. "You have a good day," he said, "and don't let anyone get you down." The young mother nodded, managing a weak smile. She picked up her daughter's hand, and they walked out of the store, leaving Karen standing alone in the express lane, her face burning with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. The incident didn't end there. One of the customers who had witnessed the exchange, a woman who worked for a local news website, wrote an article about it. The article went viral. Karen, who had always been so careful to cultivate a perfect image, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. She was labeled a Karen, a symbol of white privilege and entitlement. Her social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. She lost followers, sponsorships, and her carefully constructed reputation. But the story didn't just focus on Karen's behavior. It also highlighted the young mother, whose name was Latoya, and her struggles. Latoya was a hardworking woman who was juggling two part-time jobs while raising her daughter, Nia, on her own. She was determined to provide a good life for Nia, despite the obstacles she faced. Touched by Latoya's story, a group of people started a GoFundMe campaign to help her get back on her feet. The campaign went viral, raising over $40,000 in a matter of days. People from all over the country donated, inspired by Latoya's resilience and determination. Latoya was overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. She used the money to pay off her debts, enroll in a job training program, and secure a better apartment for herself and Naya. She was incredibly grateful for the kindness of strangers, and she vowed to use her experience to help others in similar situations. Karen, meanwhile, was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. She lost her boutique, her friends, and her comfortable lifestyle. She was ostracized by her community, her name synonymous with prejudice and entitlement. The experience was a harsh but necessary wake-up call. Karen was forced to confront the ugliness of her own biases, the shallowness of her values, and the harm she had inflicted on others. She retreated from public life, consumed by shame and regret. She spent hours in self-reflection, trying to understand how she had become the person she was. She began to read books about racism, poverty, and social justice. She volunteered at a local community center, working with people from all walks of life. The change was slow and painful. Karen had to unlearn years of ingrained thinking, to confront the uncomfortable truths about herself, and to make amends for the harm she had caused. She reached out to Latoya, offering a sincere and heartfelt apology. Latoya, to her credit, was gracious. She accepted Karen's apology, recognizing that people can change. She even agreed to meet with her, and the two women formed an unlikely friendship. Karen learned a great deal from Latoya. She learned about the challenges of single motherhood, the realities of poverty, and the importance of empathy and compassion. She began to use her platform, however diminished it was, to advocate for social justice and to fight against prejudice. Years passed. Karen was no longer the woman of privilege and prejudice, the woman who had lived in a bubble of ignorance and entitlement. She became a woman of humility and compassion, a woman who was committed to making the world a more just and equitable place. And it all started with a chance encounter in a grocery store, a moment of cruel judgment, and the unexpected triumph of a single Black mother whose story touched the hearts of thousands.